What's happening, everybody? Juan here out in the garage. And hopefully I don't break anything along the way. As always, something has to change when I'm doing this. So, work it out. Because I'm excited about it. Love it when a plan comes together. I tell you, the day I stop changing stuff on this bike is the day I'm going to get done with it. What I decided I wanted to do, because I've relocated my air ride compressor a couple of times. It was down here, and then I put this fast up tank here, so I was going to put it on top of the swing arm pivot up there. And then I decided against that. So what I'm going to do is I have the D-chopper brackets, and I've just taken the piece off the back. It's over here now. So I think what I'm going to do is that's the back of the D-chopper bracket. I think I'm going to weld a piece here, and I'm going to mount the compressor here, and it will go underneath the rear fender, and it'll have plenty of clearance. But that way I get the compressor way back out of the way, and it gives me space to do other things. And then what I'll probably do, this is steel, and I might take a piece of aluminum and build something that comes up and from underneath and then up, and that'll become a deflector so water and stuff doesn't just get continually tossed onto the compressor. So I'm going to weld this up, tack it up at least, and see what I think of it. All right, so I got the metal platform welded on to the D-chopper bracket, and that's the compressor sitting on the platform. That's a pretty good fit. Not adding too much additional metal off the back. One, just for the weight, because I may end up having to reinforce the brackets, because the only thing holding the weight of that piece is actually when these are connected to the fender. So I may do something to reinforce that. It's probably not necessary, but I also will, because I have my stock fender mounted underneath there. So I'm probably going to end up cutting off this stock fender right about here, so that I have all that space there. And then, like I said, I have some aluminum, and I'll probably build basically something to block, keep the water from hitting it up this way, maybe rubberize it or something. So that's the next step. All right, so got my isolators in there, got it drilled, got the compressor mounted to that platform. So now I'm going to put the rear fender back on and see where I'm going to have to cut on the bottom to make room for this, and that'll also determine how big and the shape and the placement of the deflector that I'm going to put on the back to keep water out. I'll also turn my pressure switch so that it's not facing back. Of course, I could also even angle this forward if I needed to, based on how that's tightened up and how much I can actually move this. All right, that's the next step. All right, excuse me, I got the compressor plate mounted up, took a piece of aluminum and made a fender guard back there. Excuse me, I don't really ride in the rain, and if I'm gonna ride in the rain, I'm not gonna ride this bike anyway. So I just wanted to be able to keep debris from jumping up and hitting the compressor. So it's nothing that's going to be watertight, but it's going to keep rocks and gravel and sand and stuff from having a direct shot at the compressor. Just doing a little fine tuning to the rear fender because I am keeping the original fender underneath, not just going with the skeleton or the fender inner. I want to keep that just for extra support, extra weight, extra rigidity in the back. But just doing a little fine tuning here so that the D-chopper brackets aren't touching it, because when the compressor kicks on, that vibration causes that to touch and it makes a lot of noise. I mean, this is pressed up against it pretty firmly when it's tight, but again, just that movement creates noise that I don't want. So just doing a little fine tuning back here. Moving right along, I went ahead and just put the fender back on temporarily with everything. I actually turned the compressor around facing the other direction so that the air line is coming off to the right instead of to the left. I moved the pressure switch from the compressor down to the fast up tank. I actually moved the fast up tank. I had it welded, this bracket welded on top of the D-chopper bracket. But what I noticed is that the head of the bolts, it actually changed these to button head. But the head of the bolts was hitting the bottom of the bag and actually lifting the bottom of the bag too high off of these brackets where they sit. And it was putting a gap at the bottom of the bag, so it wasn't going to sit right. So I took the this piece of plate, or bar, excuse me, off the top, and I welded it to the bottom instead, and put the fast up tank just a bit lower down. What I also did is I took a piece of 3/4 inch, 3/4 inch square tube and welded it across the bottom of here. Ooh, I need to take the flap wheel and clean that up a bit. That's kind of rough. But I welded that there. One, it's going to make the bracket more rigid. But what I also did was run the wiring through there to protect it. It's all wrapped here, and that wrap goes all the way through the inside. Got the wiring protected, and I turned my pressure switch backward instead of facing in, where it was just going to be too close to the wheel and our tire and the brake rotor and all that other stuff. Debris could hit it more, so I turned that around. So got all my air line and stuff coming from the front. There's a 24 inch stainless or steel braided lead coming from the compressor. They come about even here with the front of the fast up tank. And so I rerouted all of my air line, but it's all still a mess right here right now while I'm still putzing around with it. But this thing functions, which is great. Still need to get my actuator lever together for the center stand, but that's where I am for the air, for the compressor, the fast up tank, air line, and that's pretty much the final for that. So I will go back and clean this up and make it pretty. Everything is still rough right now until I'm done with all of the fabrication, because since I've changed so much, had I made this all pretty beforehand, I would have been upset, since I did take that off and move it. Forgive this thing on my arm. I actually got exposed to poison ivy, or got poison ivy. 54 years old, got poison ivy for the first time, and it's gross. But yeah, that's where I am on the air right now. All right, as always, I'm jumping around from project to project. As you saw in a previous video, center stand, I've got my design pretty much finalized on how I'm going to do the whole thing. And it's just been about how am I going to hook up an actuator of sorts to actually power this thing. And no actuator that I've been able to find is small enough to fit in any of this space. So what I did is I 3D printed this collar here, and this is strictly so I could find out where I'm going to have my lever and where any type of actuator is going to have to hook up. So in rotating, this would be in the up position from about here on this bolt to its fully extended position down. This travel is about 2 inches linearly, which is kind of what I thought. And so every actuator I've been looking at has a 50 millimeter throw for that 2 inches. But again, they've all just been really big. And then I looked in a box on the shelf I had ordered from Tool Lots like 2 years ago, just a whole bunch of linear actuators. And I forgot that I got this little thing here. And it is just small enough to fit between the kickstand stop and my center stand. I have to figure out how I'm going to mount it or something like that. But I was out here testing it because I couldn't remember what the throw was, and I hadn't looked it up, but the number on here didn't tell me right off what I needed to know. So I just got it out and got my air compressor and did a little test here in the air hole. Look how small that air hole is. I think it's 1/8 inch or something like that. So let's see if I give it a little bit of pressure. Look at that. That is exactly 2 inches. So now I just have to fabricate my mount that is going to put this here. And what I'll do is I'll take this collar off, and I'm going to fabricate a metal ring that'll go on the part of the center stand that's coming out of the side here. This residual, it's like a 1/2 inch of tube steel. And I'm going to put, I'll probably cut it out flat. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. And weld it on here with a tab that's slotted. And the reason I'll slot it is because I can put a Heim joint on the end of this. Ooh, that might be tricky because it's going to be so close. But then I can have that slot and adjust how far out away from the center of this circle here it needs to be in order to get my correct distance back and forth. Because obviously from this outer area, the travel linearly is 2 inches, but from a little bit farther down, it's not quite the same. Actually, it's longer. So I kind of want to be farther out to make sure I am where I need to be. But, you know, this collar is pretty wide. This bolt is pretty big. What I'm looking for is for something to be all the way back here. But yeah. But I'm also going to have to get a... Oh, that's all the way out. I'm going to have to reduce the speed at which this goes out, because this operates from 15 psi all the way to 116 psi. But if I put like 20 psi behind, or 50 psi behind this, and I certainly don't want my center stand going down quite that fast, so I'm going to have to modulate that so it goes back and forth relatively slowly, so just a little bit. So I will connect that to the air for my air ride, and then I don't need to have an electric one. Yes, I'm very excited about that.